So I want you to really think about the very first 30 minutes of your morning today. Like, just be totally honest with yourself for a second.
Yeah, that can be a slightly uncomfortable question for a lot of people.
Right, because according to the data we were looking at today, if you looked at your phone before your feet even hit the floor, you've already reduced your peak focus for the rest of the day by nearly half.
It is a staggering statistic. I mean, you didn't just check a quick email or look at a feed,
Exactly. You biologically handicapped your brain's ability to do deep, meaningful work for the next, like, 12 hours.
which is wild when you think about how casual we are about it.
So I really want you to picture that exact half hour today. Did you consciously take control of it? Or did you just, give it away without even realizing the invisible cost?
And it is such a seemingly small window of time, right? It feels almost totally insignificant when you are still half asleep, just navigating that morning fog.
Oh, for sure. You're just trying to find the coffee maker.
Right, but the mechanics of those first few moments are incredibly structural. They literally build the brain's daily operating system.
And that structural impact is the entire core of our source material today. We're doing a deep dive into an excerpt from the Morning Control System, Winning the First Hour.
It is a really profound piece of writing.
It really is. Because, we often operate under this assumption that our lives are shaped by these massive, once-in-a-lifetime opportunities or giant career decisions.
The big cinematic moments.
Right, exactly. But this material argues something totally different. It says the trajectory of your entire life is actually being decided in those quiet, completely ordinary mornings that look exactly like every other day.
Because those mornings compound, they stack up. And I don't just mean in terms of time management, but neurologically and psychologically. They set a permanent baseline for who you are.
So the mission of our deep dive today is to fundamentally deconstruct this. We are going to figure out the exact mechanisms behind why we constantly self-sabotage right out of the gate.
And we all do it.
We totally do. And then we're going to map out a specific, highly tactical 5-step morning control system from the text.
Which is brilliant, by the way.
It is. And this entire framework culminates in a period called the Golden Hour, which is essentially the ultimate blueprint for taking back absolute control of your days. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to understand how to actually implement a behavioral framework like this, we first have to really understand the hidden psychological reasons why our mornings are currently broken.
Right, because if we don't know the why, the how doesn't matter.
Exactly. If we bypass the underlying psychology and just, jump into a list of tactics, we are simply putting a Band-Aid on a much deeper behavioral loop. The system only works if we understand the avoidance mechanism that is actively driving the sabotage.
And the material sets up this avoidance mechanism so brilliantly with a thought experiment. It's about two identical lives.
I love this part.
Yeah. So I want you to imagine two versions of the exact same person. They possess the exact same goals, the exact same dreams, and identical raw potential.
Let's just say they're biological clones, exact same baseline intelligence.
Right. Clones. But their trajectories violently diverge based on just a single isolated variable.
Just one tiny thing.
Yes. So, person one wakes up and immediately hits the snooze button to delay the inevitable friction of the day.
Which we have all done.
Oh, 100%. So they eventually roll over, start scrolling through their phone to kind of numb out, realize they're super late, and then spend the rest of the morning rushing in an absolute panic.
They are basically playing defense against everything around them from minute one.
Exactly. Just a highly common state of chronic low-grade reactivity.
Yeah, reactivity is the perfect word for it.
But then you have person two. The alarm goes off, and they wake up instantly. They take a moment to breathe. They move their body to force alertness.
They sit down to plan their priorities.
Right, and then they execute on their biggest goal. Fast forward just 6 months. Person one feels entirely stuck in their life, overwhelmed and stagnant.
And person two.
Person two feels utterly unstoppable.
What's fascinating here is the underlying driver of that divergence. I mean, it wasn't a difference in talent.
Right, they were clones.
Exactly. It wasn't luck or some hidden socioeconomic advantage. The only thing that changed was their morning protocol. And the psychological root of this is really profound.
How so?
Well, losing your morning falling into the trap of person one is rarely a matter of actual physical exhaustion or simple laziness. It is an active mechanism of escape.
Escape? I mean, that feels a bit intense for someone who's just a little groggy and wants 9 more minutes of a good dream before dealing with reality.
I know it sounds intense, but think about the functional reality of those morning habits.
Okay.
When you immediately reach for a screen to check social media or the news, you are flooding your brain with external stimuli. Why? To avoid the discomfort of your own internal thoughts or anxieties about the upcoming day.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Right. And when you hit the snooze button, you are actively choosing unconsciousness to avoid the friction of effort. Even when you rush out the door in a panic, the rushing itself serves as an excuse.
An excuse for what?
To avoid responsibility and strategic intention. You cannot be held accountable for a deliberate plan if you never gave yourself the time to make one.
Okay, I have to push back on the snooze button aspect just a little bit here. On behalf of anyone listening who might be feeling a bit targeted right now.
Fair enough.
Is hitting the snooze button one time really catastrophic? Like, let's say you genuinely had a terrible night of sleep. It feels pretty harmless. It's just 9 extra minutes.
Well, it is not about the sleep deficit. Biologically, those 9 minutes are fragmented, really poor quality sleep that actually leaves you more exhausted.
So you don't even get good rest out of it.
No, not at all. But the real damage is the psychological precedent. The neuroplasticity of your brain is highly malleable in those very first waking moments.
I see. So it's almost like doing a physical rep at the gym. But instead of training a physical muscle for strength, by hitting snooze, you're doing a behavioral rep.
Yes, exactly.
Or training your neural pathways to choose what's easy over what leads to growth. And if you do that rep every single morning, you build a massive automated habit of surrendering to discomfort.
You are actively building the muscle of surrender. You are reinforcing a neural pathway that equates friction with retreat.
That is a brutal way to phrase it, but it makes total sense.
And this brings us to a foundational concept in our analysis from the text. The way you start your day is your identity in action.
Identity in action, that's powerful.
It really is. Who you truly are is not defined by the ambitious goals you write down in your fancy planner the night before.
Anyone can write down a goal.
Exactly. Your true identity is established in that exact split second when the alarm rings and you face your first actual moment of friction.
So that shifts the whole paradigm from, I need to feel motivated to wake up to a pure strategic imperative. Because motivation is just a fleeting chemical state, but identity is structural.
Yes. And this is exactly why high performers simply do not gamble with their mornings.
Like who?
Well, we often hear about leaders like Tim Cook famously starting their day hours before the rest of the world wakes up. But the deeper insight isn't that being awake at 4 in the morning possesses some magical intrinsic value on its own.
Right. It's not about the timestamp.
No, not at all.
Operating early is just a vehicle for establishing absolute, unshakable control before the external world starts making demands. You're essentially securing the perimeter of your day.
Control is the objective. And mornings just happen to be the most predictable, isolated environment in your entire 24-hour cycle to establish that dominance over your own attention.
Okay, so since the root problem is surrendering control to this deeply ingrained psychological desire for an easy escape, whether that's the neuronumbing infinite scroll or the snooze button, a soft approach really won't work.
No, a soft approach fails almost immediately.
We need a rigid, non-negotiable mechanism to force us back into the driver's seat, bypassing that desire for comfort entirely.
That requires a system entirely designed to intentionally override the brain's impulse to retreat.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The 5-step morning control system provides that exact overriding mechanism. Let's tackle the first 4 steps, because they essentially perform a hard reboot on your brain's operating system in those crucial first moments.
I love the hard reboot analogy. Step 1 is the absolute bedrock. Wake up without negotiation.
Meaning no snooze button at all.
None. No lingering in bed, no bargaining with yourself about how cold the floor is, just up.
Because, tying back to the identity concept, the moment you bargain, you've already lost the first battle. You've actively voted against your own stated intentions.
Right. It establishes a defensive, retreating baseline for the entire day. But biologically, you are also disrupting your sleep inertia.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when you snooze, you essentially trick your brain into restarting a full sleep cycle that it will then abruptly interrupt 9 minutes later.
Oh, that sounds awful for your brain.
It is. This leaves you with severe grogginess, clinically known as sleep drunkenness, that can actually impair your cognitive function and decision-making for hours.
Wow, so you're actually making yourself demonstrably more tired by trying to grab those extra minutes.
Counterintuitive, but entirely true.
Now, assuming you survive step 1 and actually get vertical, step 2 is where I think a vast majority of modern society fails completely.
The dopamine reset.
Yes. The rule is 45 minutes with absolutely no phone, no screens, no digital inputs.
Understanding the neuroscience here is absolutely paramount. When we wake up, our brain is in a highly sensitive state.
Right. It's transitioning from sleep.
Exactly, transitioning from the delta and theta waves of deep sleep into the alpha waves of relaxed wakefulness.
And then they grab the phone.
And if you reach for a phone while your eyes are barely open, you trigger a massive, unnatural dopamine spike from a flood of notifications, social media metrics, or, stressful work emails.
You just shock the system.
You violently jolt your brain into a state of high-stress beta waves.
I imagine that spike acts almost like a drug tolerance. Like if my brain gets accustomed to this huge, effortless hit of high-octane stimulation at 7 in the morning, sitting down to review a complex spreadsheet or read a dense report at 10 is going to feel agonizingly slow.
And totally understimulating. Your hypothesis is spot on. It artificially raises your brain's baseline requirement for stimulation.
That makes so much sense.
Dopamine receptors actually downregulate in response to massive spikes to protect the brain from overstimulation. Consequently, everyday tasks that require sustained, focused effort fail to meet this new, artificially inflated threshold.
So your brain is literally working against you.
Yes. Your brain will constantly crave the easy, low-effort high of the screen, which manifests throughout the day as chronic distraction and severe brain fog.
It's exactly like waking up and immediately eating a massive triple-layer slice of decadent chocolate cake for breakfast.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Right. Sure, the sugar rush feels incredible for about 3 minutes. But you've completely ruined your appetite. You aren't going to crave a nutritious, complex salad for lunch after that. You've wrecked your physiological palate for anything substantial or healthy for the rest of the day.
You've wrecked the dopamine palette. By abstaining for the first 45 minutes, you are preserving your receptor sensitivity. You are guarding your capacity to deploy deep focus later in the day when it actually matters.
But let's look at the reality of implementing this. 45 minutes without a phone feels like a massive, echoing void for someone who is hardwired to grab it instinctively.
It can feel like an eternity.
Yeah, if we aren't doom scrolling, we need a deliberate replacement behavior to fill that time. Otherwise, we're just staring at the wall fighting withdrawals.
And that void is precisely what steps 3 and 4 are engineered to fill. You replace passive digital consumption with active physical and mental activation.
Okay, so what is step 3?
Step 3 is body activation. Just 5 non-negotiable minutes of physical movement. Jumping jacks, push-ups, or even just a brisk walk.
Now, the usual friction here is that people wake up feeling lethargic, thinking, I'll exercise later when I actually have some energy.
Of course.
But this framework flips that causality entirely, doesn't it?
Completely. Waiting for energy is a fundamental misunderstanding of human physiology. Energy is not a prerequisite for action.
It's not.
No, it is a biological byproduct of action. When you engage in 5 minutes of brisk movement, you force a spike in cortisol, which in the morning is a healthy, natural waking signal, and you rapidly raise your core body temperature.
And that wakes you up.
Yes, this physiological shift sends an undeniable signal to your brainstem and hypothalamus that the sleep state is officially over.
So the movement is essentially a biological light switch. You aren't waiting for the room to brighten before you flick the switch.
Right.
You flick the switch to physically force the room to brighten. Okay, so you've secured the perimeter, protected your dopamine baseline, and biologically forced alertness. We've generated the raw energy.
Exactly.
But how does the system prevent you from just aggressively doing the wrong things with that energy?
Well, step 4 is explicitly designed to channel that raw energy. It is the mental clarity block.
What does that entail?
You sit down in silence, completely free of external inputs, and intensely evaluate 2 specific questions. First, what are my top 3 priorities? And second, what must I win today?
I really love the phrasing, what must I win today?
It's very intentional.
It dictates a completely different psychological posture than just staring at an overwhelming, endless to-do list of mundane chores. It demands strategic selection.
It is an exercise in extreme prioritization. When you establish crystalline clarity on the specific vector of your day before the chaos begins, you mathematically outperform the vast majority of people.
Because most people just show up to their desks and wait to see what problems land in their inbox.
Exactly, they are reactive. With this step, you move from a reactive posture to a highly proactive one.
It is truly startling how simple these 4 steps are, yet how rarely anyone actually strings them together consistently.
Uh,
But it brings up a crucial point, right?
what's that?
Identifying those top priorities in step 4 is essential, but a brilliant plan without rigorous execution is really just a nice wish. Knowing your target is entirely useless if you never actually pull the trigger.
That is the hard truth. The first 4 steps are merely the necessary preparation for the main event.
Which brings us to the 5th and most transformative phase of the entire system, where that #1 priority actually gets tackled head-on.
Yeah.
Step 5, the golden hour.
The main event.
Yes, which is heavily rooted in the concept of deep work. We're talking about 30 to 60 minutes of completely uninterrupted, hyper-focused time dedicated entirely to moving the needle on something that truly matters.
And the crucial caveat is that this happens before the noise of the world creeps in.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the golden hour is the ultimate architectural shift in how you build a successful life.
Think about the standard professional workday. By 9 in the morning, the emails are pouring in, messages are pinging, meetings are starting.
You are instantly consumed by other people's emergencies and external agendas.
You're basically playing the role of a goalie. You're just frantically trying to block incoming shots all day long, hoping you don't let too many slip past the net.
But you aren't actually scoring any goals yourself.
Precisely. When you execute deep work during the golden hour, you completely flip that dynamic.
Because you're on offense now.
Yes. By engaging with your most critical task in a state of isolated focus before the rest of the world demands your attention, you are operating entirely on the offensive.
You are aggressively moving your own life forward, on your own terms.
And this isolated, high-leverage output is defined by the author as the ultimate unfair advantage.
It's like building an impenetrable fortress of progress, while the invading army of emails and text messages is still asleep. By the time they arrive on the horizon, the most important battle of your day is already won.
That is a great way to visualize it.
But let's ground this in reality for the listener for a second. What if you're a parent with young toddlers who wake up at the crack of dawn? Or, you're working a grueling shift schedule.
That is a very common concern.
Right. Finding a full 60 minutes of silent, monastic, deep work might be physically impossible for some people. The framework mentions 30 to 60 minutes, but is the magic in the duration or in the density of the focus?
It is heavily weighted toward the density of focus and the specific intention behind it. There is a concept in cognitive science called attention residue.
Attention residue, what is that?
It proves that every time you switch tasks, like glancing at a phone during work, a residue of your attention remains stuck on the previous task.
Oh, wow. So you're never fully present.
Exactly. It severely degrades your cognitive performance. So a fiercely protected 20 or 30-minute block where you apply undivided, zero-residue attention to a single priority is vastly superior to 3 hours of fragmented, multitasking effort.
That is incredibly encouraging. The core premise is just acting with absolute clarity and undivided purpose.
Yes. So even a compressed 20-minute golden hour fundamentally alters the math of your productivity.
Because you're applying 100% of your cognitive bandwidth to the highest leverage lever, completely free of any of that attention residue.
Precisely. Just imagine the profound relief of waking up tomorrow morning without the chronic background anxiety of chaos.
No frantic rushing to find your keys.
No mental fog about what you actually need to accomplish. You've bypassed the escape mechanisms entirely.
Because you consciously chose engagement over surrender.
You move with absolute clarity. You act with deliberate purpose. You actually feel the tactile sensation of being in control of the steering wheel.
Which is such a rare feeling these days.
It is. Experiencing that once is empowering. But executing that system morning after morning, that is the specific mechanical process by which ordinary trajectories transform into exceptional ones over time.
So what does this all mean? When we distill this deep dive down to its absolute essence, the morning control system, waking without negotiation, preserving your dopamine baseline, forcing physical activation, establishing mental clarity, and executing the golden hour is far more profound than a rigid list of productivity chores.
It is a daily physical recommitment to your own identity.
It is proving to yourself through undeniable action who you are, before the rest of the world tries to dictate who you should be.
Which leads directly to a powerful challenge to leave everyone with today. Tomorrow morning, when that alarm inevitably goes off and the initial friction hits, do not try to be perfect.
Perfection is an illusion that just breeds procrastination anyway.
Exactly. Just do not be average.
Choose the harder rep. Train the muscle of engagement.
Win the first hour. Because the fundamental promise of this framework is undeniably clear. If you possess the discipline to conquer that first hour, you possess the capacity to conquer anything else the day throws at you.
It dictates the entire tone of the battlefield.
This raises an important question, though, one that isn't explicitly detailed in our source material, but is a necessary logical extension of everything we've analyzed today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If winning the first hour of the day dictates our success and establishes our dominion, well, what does our last hour of the day reveal about us?
Oh, the hour right before we go to sleep.
Yes. How are we utilizing that specific window to prepare for tomorrow's friction? If we are endlessly scrolling our screens until the exact second we lose consciousness, aren't we essentially planting landmines for ourselves?
Making sure we fail, step one, the moment the sun comes up.
Guaranteeing it.
That is a phenomenal layer to add. The morning is the arena for execution, but the night before is where the actual preparation happens. It's a continuous, unbreakable loop.
You cannot expect to dominate the first hour if the final hour was spent in complete surrender.
Such a great point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Our goal is always to synthesize these vital insights, but the application is entirely in your hands. Don't let this be just another piece of interesting audio you passively consumed. Actively deploy it tomorrow morning. Leave the phone in another room tonight. Set the alarm, and when it goes off, take absolute control. Win your morning, and you'll win your life. Goodbye for now.